It's an F5 tornado.
It's coming! Let's go, now!
In the heart of central Texas, one afternoon in the spring of 1997 rewrites what science believes about tornadoes. Along Interstate 35, the small farming town of Jarrell sits quietly, a place where little of note ever seems to happen. Yet the sky above these open fields is about to produce a storm unlike anything recorded before or since in the region. Meteorologists still study this single day, because what unfolds here defies the patterns they thought they understood. It is a story of nature's raw power, of ordinary human courage, and of a science forced to rewrite its assumptions. And it begins, as so many Texas stories do, with a sky that looks almost gentle before it turns against the land. How can a storm move so slowly that people stand and watch it approach, yet still erase a neighborhood from the map? Why do the warnings, issued in good time and heard by many, still fail to prevent the tragedy about to unfold here? What the official record rarely explains is how this ordinary Tuesday becomes a turning point for an entire science. To understand the paradox, we must first return to the land itself, and to the storms that have shaped it for ages. For the answer lies not only in the sky that day, but in a century of lessons Texas has learned the hardest way. This is the story of Jarrell, of the neighbors who lived it, and of the fragile line between a normal day and disaster. Texas lies at the southern edge of a vast corridor where warm Gulf air and cold northern winds collide with fury. For generations, the people here learn to read the sky, watching for the strange green tint that signals real danger. Records of violent storms stretch back well over a century, etched into the memory of countless small communities. The land is wide and open, and the flat horizon offers little to slow the winds that gather across the Great Plains. Spring is the season of collision, when the seasons themselves seem to wrestle in the skies above the quiet farmland. The warmth rising from the Gulf meets the cold pressing down from the north, and the atmosphere grows restless. Out of that restlessness are born the great storms that have defined life in this part of the country for ages. The Waco tornado of 1953 remains a landmark of tragedy, striking the heart of a crowded downtown without warning. That disaster reshapes how Texans think about shelter, about warnings, and about the power gathering above them. Across the decades, each violent storm teaches a lesson, and each lesson is written into the region's long memory. Communities build stronger, watch the skies more closely, and pass their hard-won caution to the next generation. Yet no county has yet seen the very worst, and the memory of true catastrophe still feels distant to a great many. The plains north of Austin are farmland and pasture, dotted with small towns strung along the old federal highway. It is quiet country, where the rhythms of planting and harvest matter far more than the distant threat of storms. The horizon here belongs to windmills and water towers, not to the towering monsters of the deep interior plains. Here, a tornado is a rumor from somewhere else, a story told on the evening news about some other unlucky town. No one imagines that their own fields could one day become the most studied ground in the history of the science. By the 1990s, the science of meteorology advances quickly, scanning the atmosphere for the first faint signs. Doppler radar begins to promise earlier warnings, offering families the precious minutes that once did not exist. Radar sweeps the horizon every few minutes, translating the invisible winds into shapes upon a glowing screen. Meteorologists learn to spot the telltale hook, the signature of rotation hiding within a distant, towering storm. Each advance in the science saves lives, shrinking the gap between the moment of danger and the moment of warning. Still, the atmosphere remains vast and wild, and no instrument can yet promise certainty in the face of the sky. Forecasters learn to recognize the ingredients of disaster: instability, moisture, lift, and turning winds aloft. When these four elements align in the sky, the atmosphere can produce the most violent storms known on the planet. Yet, nature keeps its secrets well, and the rarest events emerge from conditions no textbook has fully described. But a warning is only as good as the seconds it buys, and those seconds depend on people heeding the urgent call. This is the delicate balance of the science, confident in its patterns, yet always a step behind the living sky. The morning of May 27th, 1997, dawns warm and humid, an unremarkable spring day across the farmland of central Texas. Far to the north, an upper-level low drifts across the Great Plains, pulling the strongest winds away from Texas. This small detail matters enormously, because the usual recipe for violent tornadoes seems, this day, to be missing. Forecasters can see the danger of large hail and strong winds, but the ingredients for a monster appear to be absent. The winds high above are weak, and the powerful shear that normally spins the fiercest tornadoes is barely present. By the standards of the textbooks, this is not the sky that produces one of the most violent storms in all history. And yet, beneath that deceptively calm pattern, the atmosphere is quietly loading itself with extraordinary energy. The air near the ground grows unstable, storing more raw fuel than forecasters usually see in an entire season. A cold front sags slowly southward, a dry line sharpens to the west, and a subtle wave ripples through the still air. Where these invisible boundaries meet near the city of Waco, the stage is set for something no mortal anticipates. It is a reminder that the sky does not read the textbooks, and that the rarest disasters wear the plainest disguise. The energy stored in the air this day reaches levels that forecasters rarely record anywhere across the continent. It is fuel without a fuse, waiting only for the smallest spark to release it upward into the towering clouds above. And, near Waco, along that quiet meeting of boundaries, the spark is about to be struck at last on this warm afternoon. By late morning, the first towers of cloud rise sharply, their tops flattening into anvils against the high winds. To an untrained eye, they seem harmless, but to the forecasters, they carry the unmistakable shape of real trouble. Just before noon, the Storm Prediction Center issues a tornado watch across a wide stretch of central Texas. The warning acknowledges the instability, though few expect the afternoon to become one for the record books. Near Waco, towering clouds begin to build where the cold front and the rising wave of air quietly converge. The first storm blossoms with startling speed, feeding on air so unstable that it climbs miles high within minutes. What forms above the fields is a supercell, a rotating thunderstorm, the most dangerous kind the sky can create. But this supercell behaves strangely from the very start, drifting toward the southwest against the usual path. Because the upper winds are so weak, the storm moves slowly, lingering over the land instead of racing across it. This unusual motion will prove decisive, for a slow storm concentrates its fury on whatever lies beneath it. The forecasters, watching their screens, sense that the afternoon is turning into something they rarely witness. As the hours pass, the storm deepens, its rotation tightening, its dark base sinking closer toward the ground. The atmosphere feeds it endlessly, and the supercell grows into a towering engine of wind, rain, and rising heat. Everything now depends on where this slow, powerful storm will choose to lower its funnel toward the earth below. For hours, the supercell wanders, a dark and deliberate presence looming over the open fields of central Texas. It pulses with lightning, drops curtains of rain and hail, and turns the afternoon sky an ominous shade of green. Beneath its churning base, the rotation strengthens, an unseen wheel of wind turning faster with every minute. The storm draws in the warm, moist air for miles around, feeding on the landscape like a slow and patient fire. With each passing hour, it organizes further, until its structure becomes a textbook portrait of a killer storm. As the afternoon deepens, the storms march down the Interstate 35 corridor, moving from Waco toward the south. Near Lake Belton, a distinct cell strikes the shoreline communities, tearing at homes and lakeside structures. At Morgan's Point Resort, the winds damage houses and scatter debris, an early warning of the violence to come. Families along the water take shelter as the sky darkens, sensing that this is no ordinary Texas thunderstorm. The damage here is significant, yet it is only a prelude, a first act before the storm reveals its full power. Emergency crews begin to mobilize, radios crackle with reports, and the region braces for a long, dangerous evening. Word spreads from community to community that the storms are behaving in ways the forecasters did not expect. Along the highway, drivers watch the darkening horizon, uncertain whether to press on or to seek shelter nearby. The slow advance of the storm gives a strange, false sense of time, as though the danger might yet pass them by. The people of Bell County watch the sky with a growing unease, remembering that spring can turn deadly here. Radios urge caution, and across the countryside, families move indoors, drawing their children close beside them. But the supercell is only gathering itself, drawing on the vast energy stored in the air across the whole region. As it drifts on into Williamson County, the atmosphere beneath the storm begins to spin in earnest at last. Just after 3 in the afternoon, a small tornado forms, thin as a rope, dancing briefly across the open fields. It rises and falls, weakens and returns, a restless funnel testing the ground before lifting back into the cloud. Minutes later, a second funnel descends, broader than the first, splitting into several twisting braided vortices. These early tornadoes are warnings written across the sky, each one stronger and more organized than the last. Storm spotters relay what they see, and the reports flow into the offices where forecasters race against the clock. The atmosphere is organizing itself with frightening speed, each funnel a rehearsal for the one still to come. Each rope of wind that rises and falls tightens the region's dread, a countdown no one can quite yet name aloud. At 3:30, the National Weather Service issues a tornado warning for the area around the town of Jarrell. Radios and televisions carry the alert, and across the town, families begin to weigh what they ought to do next. Because the storm moves so slowly, many can see the funnel clearly, a rare and deeply deceptive kind of visibility. Some stand watching, transfixed, judging the distance, unsure whether to flee down the highway or take shelter. The unnatural pace of the storm makes it hard to believe, in that moment, just how much danger is truly approaching. For those who have never seen a tornado linger this way, the slow motion reads as time, and time feels like safety. It is a fatal illusion, one the survivors will remember for the rest of their lives with painful, aching clarity. Then, northwest of Jarrell, a third tornado touches down, small and slender, giving little hint of its future. Within moments it swells, drawing energy from the supercharged air, growing wider and darker by the second. It broadens into a wedge nearly 3/4 of a mile across, a churning wall that blots out the horizon itself. A photographer captures the funnel at this very moment, and the image will travel around the world for decades. In the picture, the tornado seems to have legs, two dark columns striding across the land like an advancing giant. The eerie shape earns a haunting nickname, the dead man walking, a phrase that will outlive the storm itself. The name captures something real and unsettling, for the tornado advances with an unnatural, deliberate slowness. It does not race across the countryside as most tornadoes do. It creeps, and that patience makes it far more deadly. The winds within are almost beyond measure, estimated at more than 260 miles every single hour. Few structures on Earth are built to withstand such force, and none of them stand along this tornado's slow path. The funnel churns the soil, lifts the fields, and drags a curtain of debris that darkens the whole afternoon sky. Those who see it approach describe a wall of ground and wind moving with the terrible calm of something alive. The debris cloud at its base swirls with soil and shattered fields, a churning brown haze hundreds of feet high. No siren can convey what the eye now sees, and no words fully prepare a community for a storm of this vast scale. The tornado grinds forward at little more than a walking pace, a slowness that turns minutes into an eternity. Every second it lingers, it deepens its mark upon the land, unhurried and utterly indifferent to what lies ahead. Ahead of the storm lies Double Creek Estates, a quiet subdivision of some 36 homes northwest of the town. Here, families have built their lives among the open fields, in well-constructed houses anchored to the ground. On this afternoon, roughly 130 people live within this small, peaceful, close-knit community. Many have heard the warnings on their televisions, and in these final minutes, they must decide where to turn now. The tornado crosses the first county road, and where it passes, it lifts the very asphalt from the roadbed itself. Along each road it crosses, hundreds of feet of pavement are torn away, a detail that stuns the investigators later. A clock recovered from the debris is frozen at 3:48, marking the moment the storm enters the neighborhood streets. For nearly 3 long minutes, the tornado sits almost in place above the subdivision, refusing to move onward. Those 3 minutes concentrate a violence that few places on Earth have ever recorded so completely or so clearly. When the winds at last move on, the transformation of the land is almost impossible to comprehend or describe. Where sturdy homes once stood, only bare concrete foundations remain, swept clean as if they were never built. The soil itself is scoured away, and the fields around the houses are stripped down to the raw earth beneath. Trees lose their bark entirely, and vehicles are carried great distances, reduced far beyond any recognition. Rescuers arriving later nearly drive past the site, unable to tell that a neighborhood had ever stood there. The measured words of the official assessment note the strange absence of large debris across the entire area. Only the smallest fragments remain, scattered wide, a silent testament to the sheer power of the passing winds. It is, the experts will conclude, among the most extreme tornado damage ever documented in the United States. Investigators walk the bare foundations for days, measuring, photographing, struggling to grasp what they see. The very ground has been rewritten, and the maps that once showed a neighborhood now describe only open land. Where children played and families gathered, there is now only bare earth, swept smooth by the passing winds. The scale of the loss is difficult to hold in the mind, even for those who have studied storms their whole lives. Within this small community, the storm exacts a terrible price, and 27 lives are lost that afternoon. Among them are children, and the loss reaches deep into every corner of the close-knit town and its surroundings. Families face impossible circumstances in those final minutes, decisions that no one should ever have to make. Some seek shelter within their homes, while others attempt to flee along the roads as the great funnel bears down. In a storm of such rare violence, the ordinary rules of survival offer little of their usual protection at all. The survivors speak later of a sound beyond description, a roar that seems to swallow the whole world entirely. They recall a crushing pressure in the air, a darkness that descends, and a silence almost as frightening after. Their testimonies, offered with quiet dignity, become a record of both the storm's power and their own endurance. In the days that follow, the community gathers to account for the missing and to care for one another gently. Neighbors, volunteers, and complete strangers arrive from across the state, drawn by a shared instinct to help. The town of Jarrell, so small and so quiet, finds itself at the center of the nation's attention and its sorrow. Reporters arrive from across the country, and the nation watches a farming town shoulder an almost unbearable weight. Through it all, the people of Jarrell hold fast to one another, choosing dignity and quiet strength over despair. In their grief, they find a fierce and gentle solidarity, the kind that only shared hardship can truly forge. Meanwhile, the same storm system pushes farther south, and a separate tornado bears down on the town of Cedar Park. There, an ordinary afternoon of shopping is unfolding inside a busy supermarket along the town's main boulevard. The store manager steps out into the parking lot and watches the dark funnel taking shape in the near distance. Recognizing the danger at once, he hurries back inside and calls every customer toward the center of the store. He asks those trying to leave to stay put, and he guides some 60 people into the walk-in coolers at the back. The refrigerated rooms are remarkably sturdy, a building within a building, their walls braced against the wind. Moments later, the tornado strikes, and the wide roof of the store collapses inward onto the aisles far below. Yet inside those coolers, the customers and staff survive, shielded by the quick thinking of one very calm man. Only minor injuries emerge from that sheltered space, a near miracle amid the wreckage of the ruined building. Rescue officials later credit the manager's decision with saving many dozens of lives in a single afternoon. It stands as a reminder that even against nature's greatest fury, preparation and courage can change everything. In the years to come, the story of that supermarket is told and retold as a lesson in the value of readiness. One clear decision, made in a matter of seconds, becomes the difference between catastrophe and survival there. It is the mirror image of the day's greater tragedy, proof of how much a warning heeded in time can truly save. Across central Texas that day, the sky produces some 20 tornadoes in the span of only a few violent hours. Homes fall in other neighborhoods, and community after community feels the reach of a system that will not relent. Yet nowhere does the devastation match what unfolds at Jarrell, where the great tornado leaves its deepest mark. By evening, the storms finally weaken, and an exhausted region begins to grasp the full scale of what has happened. Power lines lie tangled across the roads, communication fails, and darkness settles over the ruined open fields. Into that darkness pour the first responders, the volunteers, and the quiet determination of a wounded state. Through the night they search, they comfort, and they begin the long labor of caring for a shattered community. Dawn reveals the full scope of the loss, a landscape scraped bare beneath a sky that has finally fallen silent. The work of grieving begins, alongside the slow, patient work of clearing, of counting, and of coming together. Aid arrives from every direction, and a state accustomed to hard weather rallies around one of its smallest towns. In church halls and on open fields, strangers become neighbors, bound by a sorrow that words cannot fully carry. In a single afternoon, an ordinary Texas town becomes the site of the most violent tornado in the state's history. The land is transformed, the community is shattered, and a confident science is humbled in a matter of minutes. What forecasters believed impossible has happened, born from a sky that broke every rule they thought they knew. The storm that no textbook predicted has written a new and sobering chapter in the long study of the atmosphere. When the final accounting is complete, 27 lives are lost, all within the small Double Creek community. The tornado carves a path of destruction that will be studied and remembered for many generations to come. The damage climbs into the many tens of millions, but the true loss can never be measured in dollars alone. The governor of Texas visits the town and, surveying the emptied fields, calls the scene simply mind-boggling. In time, a quiet memorial rises where the homes once stood, with 27 trees planted in living memory. And in a quiet act of defiance, many of the families choose to stay, rebuilding their lives on the same ground. For the survivors, the storm becomes a permanent dividing line, marking all of life into before and after. The empty fields slowly green again, and children who were not yet born grow up hearing the story of that day. Streets are rebuilt, homes rise once more, and the community carries its memory forward with quiet determination. The names of the lost are spoken each year, so that a single afternoon's sorrow is never allowed to fade away. Grief slowly softens into remembrance, and remembrance becomes a quiet promise to those who did not survive. The lessons of that terrible afternoon reshaped the science of forecasting slow-moving and unusual tornadoes. Researchers pore over the data, asking how such fury could arise from a sky so lacking in the usual warning signs. They learn that extreme instability alone, even without strong winds aloft, can breed the most violent of storms. It is a humbling lesson that the sky can assemble catastrophe from ingredients no one thought sufficient before. Their answers refine the warnings that protect us. Still, a quiet legacy carried forward from a day of great loss. The region north of Austin has since grown many times over, filling with new homes, new roads, and new families. A storm like this, one striking such a place today, would test every warning system we have ever yet devised. And so, the memory of Jarrell is not only history, but a question posed to each generation that comes after it. How do we honor the lost, and how do we keep faith with them when the same skies still gather above our heads? The answer lies in vigilance, in preparation, and in the courage to heed the warnings that others paid to earn. The story of Jarrell endures as both a solemn warning and a testament to human resilience before nature's power. And so we remember, not to dwell upon the sorrow, but to honor those who were lost and those who carried on after.